or not. Okay. So every time I start a stream, it doesn't start until I say this is not for kids. I don't want to deal with next when I say yes, and it probably ask me a lot more questions. Okay, what is your content? What does it do? I think it will scare kids, so maybe it's
You know
not.
what's funny is my kids are actually learning that in school. They're
Really, they do have. I won't say coding boot camps, but I know in our company and different companies, they invite like high school or some like lower classes students, and they come for a day. It's called Hour of Coding or something, some program.
yeah, my wife did an event at the University of Phoenix, and this is the day.
Oh, really? All
But
right.
when we were doing the pre-work, my kids came up to me and were like, "Oh, Dad, we tried that all the time at school." I'm like, "What?" Like, yeah, it's coding. I'm like,
How do you know all this stuff? That's funny. Maybe you can ask them to solve your homework. I just kidding.
I tried. They're against it.
All right, so let me close this out. This is good. I'll stop my services. I did not. Services. Oops. Sorry. I should just stop this and leave it for another time, but no. Okay, there you go. All right, so MongoDB is closed. All right. Welcome to week 19. Starting from this week until the next 3 weeks, we'll be working with React. Okay? So here is what you guys have been waiting for. You just have to wait one more day. I'm not going to introduce React officially, React today, but what we are going to look at, the concepts, they are extremely used in React. So before we start React and we get confused that, hey, what is this? Is this part of React or not? So I'm going to solve those issues, make sure you understand that these are not part of React. These are actually part of JavaScript. They are a little bit more advanced JavaScript, but React uses them a lot. So they've kind of gained more popularity just because, one of the bigger framework has started using it. So they have gotten more exposure. So I want to make sure that we understand those concepts. Okay. There are a lot more concepts, but I have chosen top 6. Okay. These are the 6 most widely used JavaScript features in React. And I have sorted them by order of importance. Okay, the first one is the most important, and the last one is least important. It is still all 6 of them are used, but from starting from the top, that's more used. Then the second, third, fourth, the last one is used, but it's not a rare case, but it's least used. And by what I mean by that is React kind of takes care of few things. It gives you some boilerplate code. It kind of writes some of the code for you. So the last concept is already there, but we need to understand what it is and how it works. Okay. The last one again is not new concept. We have already seen when we are doing constructors. I'll just go through them really fast towards the end. Okay, it's already a known concept, but we'll make sure we understand that. Okay, so 6 things. We'll start from that. Before I begin these 6 concepts, everybody understand these are JavaScript concept. It has nothing to do with React. The only thing it has to do with React is React uses these 6 a lot, and that's why they have become more popular. You will see these often. Okay, again, these are JavaScript. You can use this in your browser or you can use in Node.js. Node.js makes sure that it is compatible it is porting over all the JavaScript features into Node.js. Okay, we understand that Node.js is a runtime environment which is separate from JavaScript. It uses the same syntax, but it is its own standalone thing. So somebody has to go and maintain Node.js, make sure that whatever features are in JavaScript, which runs in my browser, they are same in your Node.js, so that people are, it's less confusing. That's all. Okay. So the activity that I'm going to solve, you can run the same code in your browser or in your Node.js app. Both of them are fine. Okay. There's absolutely no coding change between the concept that I'm going to show. So you can create an index.js and index.html and run that code. It will work. Or I'm going to run in Node.js, but they both are same. Okay. Is that clear? Any confusion? Any question before we start? Okay. All right. So first of all, um, the lecture is called ES6. I want to make sure what ES6 is. So ES stands for ECMAScript. That is the official name of JavaScript. All right. It's called ECMA. ECMA is a abbreviation. It's called ECMAScript or ES, which is basically JavaScript. Okay, what is ECMA? You can look up the whole abbreviation. ECMA is the organization that has taken JavaScript under its wing, and they are responsible for making sure JavaScript is running, making sure that JavaScript is updated. Any new features that are added to JavaScript, it has to go through this organization called ECMA. Okay, nobody owns JavaScript anymore. It is owned by a organization to make sure it is adding new features and everything. Okay, so JavaScript's name behind the scene is called ECMAScript. That's like the official name of JavaScript. Um, so that's what ES stands for. Okay, now with any product you have versions, right? So ES6 or ECMAScript 6 means this is the sixth version of JavaScript. All right. So the version that we will be looking at today is ES6. Okay. So basically, it means ECMAScript 6. Why is it? Why do you hear ES6 a lot? This is the latest and the greatest edition in JavaScript that is slowly making way to all possible browsers. Okay, it's not 100% acquired. There's only one browser that does not support ECMAScript. Any guesses? Internet Explorer. It does not support ES6. So if your audience, you think that the website that you are developing is going to be run on IE, I would suggest don't use any of the ES6 features. Make sure you're using var, like Stone Age people, right? Var variable, show, let, and const, because those are part of ES6. Because your website is not going to run on IE. But Microsoft kind of stopped making IE. Their new browser is called Edge. If your users are on Edge, Edge supports ES6. Okay? So, now, is there a ES7, ES8, ES9? Yes, there is. But the thing is, ES7 is only supported by Chrome and one more browser, Opera, like a later version. None of the other browsers support any other version higher for ES6. Okay, right now we are trying to go to 100% ES6 compatible browsers. Like there won't be any browser that is not going to not support ES6. Okay, I think it's like 90% or 95% already there. I think just because of IE, there's a small percentage of people that are not able to view that website that runs on ES6. Okay, so again, ES6 was released in 2015. Some of the features we are already using in JavaScript that are part of ES6. Okay, for example, the let, const, and what's the next one? Let and const, yeah. So let and const keywords are part of ES6. Okay, if you have code, if you're using an older version JavaScript, for example ES5, those things are not available. Okay, so let and const are part of ES6. Since our browser has ES6 support, Node.js is updated. That's why we are able to use let and const. If if you go back to a Chrome version that does not support ES6, you won't be able to use let and const or any other feature that I'm going to show you today. Okay. All right. So one of the features, as I said, let and const, they are part of ES6. And then I'll start and I'll go over 6 more concepts that are part of ES6 and will only run if your JavaScript is using ES6 version. Okay, but we don't have to worry about it. Latest Chrome versions, even a little bit more earlier ones, they all are on ES6, so we will not run into this issue. But again, if you create a website and somebody opens it on IE, it's not going to work, right? It's going to fail. It won't recognize let, const, or any of the concept that I'm showing. It won't be able to it will able to run React. We'll talk about when we get to React how React does it. React actually takes its code and compiles into an older version of JavaScript to make sure it runs on IE as well. But when we get to React, we'll talk about that. Okay, any questions before we move on to the coding part and we look at some more concepts which are part of ES6? So one of them is the let const. We have already covered that, so I'm going to skip that and move on to arrow functions. Okay. So arrow functions, you guys must have seen the code. You guys have heard about it. Those are part of ES6, the latest JavaScript versions. Okay. Arrow functions gain more popularity because they started using in C# in Java. They're called lambda functions. So JavaScript was like, all right, well, we need to attract more programmers. So they also introduced something called arrow functions. But they are similar to what we have in Java and C# as well. Okay, so let's take a look at and see what arrow functions are and how do we declare them. What are some of the drawbacks or where you cannot use arrow functions, where it will work, and all that stuff. All right, so I'm going to create a folder. We'll call it arrow functions. Okay, and I will just name this I'll just call it index.js. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out our regular function. Let's say const create greeting, and then you have your function. Let's pass in a 2 arguments. Okay, and let's do a return message by, and then say again. Okay. The second thing, the literal strings, these are also part of ES6. Okay. Let const, literal strings, both of them are part of ES6. Arrow functions is also part of ES6. All right. So if you are running an older version, you won't be able to use literal strings. Okay. Template strings. Template literals. That's what it's called. All right. How do we call this function? We will say create greeting, pass in a, this is a message, and then some name. Okay. And this is how your regular function works. Okay. All right. Now, how do we convert this into a arrow function? So let me just copy this and comment this out so that you guys can see the comparison. In arrow function, you drop the keyword function. There's no keyword function. Okay, that's the first step. Okay, all it starts with is the arguments. Okay, and then since arrow is in the name, you put an arrow after the arguments, and this becomes your arrow function. That's all. Okay, so we had a keyword function, right? This is my regular function. Remove the function name. the keyword function, and put an arrow after the arguments, and this becomes your arrow function. All right. Let me go back and put this in a single line, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. The second thing, if your function, or if your arrow function only has a single line, you can remove the curly braces, okay, and also the return keyword. All right, again, this is only possible if your function only has one line and you're returning that line. Okay, so this simplified format, what does it do? It is going to execute this single line and also return whatever the output of this is. Okay, now again, if you think this is confusing, if you are using curly braces, then you have to put the keyword return if you're returning something from your function. If it is not returning something, you can ignore it. But if you have parentheses, it is you need the keyword return. Okay, but usually you will see, since people are using arrow function, and if it's only a single line of code, single line of function that returns that single line, you will see people skipping this whole thing, because that's kind of like the attraction to use this. Very less code in a single line, and it tells you what you're trying to do. So I'm creating a function called create greeting, which takes in 2 arguments and returns this template, this literal string, which kind of concatenates these 2 things and returns me that. Okay, but if you have multiple lines, like you're trying to do something more, then you need curly braces, and then you will put your whatever next lines you're trying to. Oops. You are going to say let I is equal to 2 or something, and then say return message by name, and let's say I. For some reason, you need to return this variable as well. Okay, again, multiple lines, use curly braces, single line, no need to use curly braces or a return statement, and you can just simply shortcut this into a single line. Let's keep this. Okay. All right. Now, same goes with your arguments. Okay. Let me go ahead and create a second function. We'll call it second greeting, and this only takes name, and it just says message is this. It returns this message to me. Okay, what does this tell me? That my arrow function has a single argument with single line of function body, and it does some operation and returns me this string. Okay, now if you have a single argument, you don't need these parentheses as well. Okay, similar to the function body, remember that if your function body only has a single line, you don't need those curly braces. Similar to that, if you only have a single argument, you don't need these parentheses as well. Okay, so from our this function, we have come to this single line. If this was just like one argument function. So how would you call this? The calling part remains unchanged. Second message. Okay, this still remains the same. So you will have a variable, let's say greeting1, you can assign it to it, and then you will have a second variable, greeting2, you can assign to it, because these functions are going to return something, because this is how it's working over here. Okay, questions? Now, going forward, I'm going to be using arrow functions only so that we get into the habit of using them, seeing them more often. Again, React uses it a lot. Again, do you have an option to go back to this syntax? You do. Yeah. If for some reason you don't want this, you can still keep using this. But from now on, I'm going to try my best to write every function using the arrow function unless it does not allow me. And we'll see in what case it's not going to work. What is it?
So yeah, just
Yeah, like this. Empty. Yeah. Good question. If you don't have any argument, then just an empty parenthesis. So this would be something like constant third greeting. I don't have any argument, so empty. And then message is something like this. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Now, second part, where can we not use these arrow functions? You cannot use arrow functions in your objects. What do I mean by that? Let's say I have a object. Let's say const dog object. Okay, it's going to have a couple of properties such as name. Okay, it's going to have sound. Okay, and it has some functions. Right? How do we define our functions in objects? We'll say make sound and then function body. Let's say it doesn't take anything and just prints out console logs this dot sound. Okay, and how do we refer this outside? We're going to say dog dot make sound. Okay, and once we run this, what is going to happen? You're going to get a console log woof, right? But so this is a regular function. What you cannot do is you cannot replace this with your arrow function. For example, you cannot, this is not going to work. I'm going to remove the first one. If you have sound and then replace this function with arrow function, doesn't take any arguments, so empty. Okay, and a single line, so I just want console log this, and I would say console log this. Okay, and let's go ahead and comment this out. Now, if you try to run this, you will see you're going to get undefined. Okay, so this is one thing. You cannot use arrow function syntax in your objects. Okay, is that clear? You cannot use arrow functions in your object. You still have to use this function syntax. Things that we faced in our JavaScript when we were using set timeout. If you use your set timeout, right, it takes an argument, a callback function, no arguments, and you can just say console log. Let's move this inside. So the first argument is a callback function, and second is the millisecond. So every second this is going to print out. Okay, we're using set timeout. So remember, what does set timeout do? After these many milliseconds, which is actually 1 second, is going to go ahead and print this out. Okay, now if you remember, the problem with this was if you use set timeout function inside an object with this syntax, it would give you an error and it would say this dot sound is undefined because it loses scope over here for this, and it's referring to the window object. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys remember that, but this is how the set timeout was working when I introduced you guys the object part, and I said this is how this is not, you cannot use this. So, but you can replace, you can fix that issue. The second way is to make this an arrow function. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of weird. So if I make set timeout as an arrow function, this is going to work. So for example, if I say set timeout, okay, oops, set timeout, and how do I convert this into an arrow function? What is the first argument? First argument is a function, right? And this is how we have defined this function. So instead of the regular definition, you can replace this with your arrow function. Doesn't take any parameters, okay? And then what does it do? It outputs console log this. And then the second argument is your timer, okay? Again, this syntax is going to fail. It's not going to work. It kind of loses the scope. Okay, remember from your object class when we introduced object in our JavaScript. But to solve, the second way to solve this is you can use a callback function within this function. So there are two things that this tells me. The first thing, you cannot use a callback function as your object property. Okay, when you're declaring a function inside your object, you cannot use your arrow function. That's not going to work. But arrow function works if they are inside another function or they are part of another function's argument. Okay, that's where inside an object, that's where the callback function are going to work. Okay, um, for example, these set timeout, set timer, and all those functions, they don't work inside an object. What happens is they lose this focus. So the this over here is referring to the window function, but you can solve this by using arrow function instead of the regular definition of a function. Okay, so these are the two things that you need to watch out. The first thing is a little bit easier. Inside an object, you cannot declare or you cannot use arrow function syntax. The second thing is if you are using set timeout, set timer, what was it, cancel, whatever those timeout functions are, you can use arrow function as an argument instead of this one, and this will work and it will still have the scope and it's going to work. Okay. Any question? Most probably, I mean, you will run into the issue that where you have an object and you're trying to put a call and an arrow function. This is a little bit rare, but I want you guys to know because if somebody asks you, hey, I'm trying to run this code, is this correct or not? So so that you guys are aware that this is not correct. If you have a function, let's say print, okay, and then you have a callback uh, function that does something. So this, you cannot use arrow function inside your object, but you can use it as an argument over here. All right, any questions before we move on to the next activity and you guys will take a look at the arrow function. The next activity, you will be given a bunch of functions that you need to convert into arrow functions. All right, any questions? No questions? I'm going to be using arrow functions now, so ask. Got it? Okay, so let's do activity number 2. And in this activity, you are given a bunch of functions. Let's take a look at that. Activity number 2. Okay. So all of these are with our old function definition. You'll have to convert each one of them. Run this code. Make sure that it runs. If you have the correct syntax, that's all. So you'll have to change this into arrow function definition, arrow function definition, arrow function definition. Oh, this is the calling part, so this is okay. Here's a function over here. See if you can even convert this into arrow function, right? Any function can be converted unless it's inside an object. This is the third function. Convert this into arrow function. This is the tricky one. It's an object, and of course you cannot convert these into arrow functions, but give it a try, convert them, see the error, and then put them back. Um, what else? Okay, that should be it. Again, you don't have to worry about the function body, what it is doing. What you have to make sure is that you are able to convert, you are able to write the correct syntax for arrow functions. The first one is an argument, takes in one argument. It has multiple lines, so you might want to keep the curly braces, right? So this should be okay. And then when you run this, you should see this message. Second one also, you can convert this. This one takes two arguments. Again, it's returning multiple lines, so you need the parentheses as well. This is interesting. See if you can convert this into arrow function as well. So single line one should be following the same part. You should be, even though it's not part of the activity, but this is a function. I can convert this also into a call into an arrow function because it's callback is the name that we are giving, but it's a function, right? Yeah, it's a function with one argument, so you can convert that as well. As long as the keyword function is there, you can convert them into arrow function unless they are inside an object. Okay, remember that. So yeah, you can convert this into.
But yeah.
All right. Any questions? Any function that is more confusing? So let me do a couple and then move on. So the first one, you just remove the function, put in an arrow. This works. Since it's a single argument, you wouldn't even put a parentheses. So this would be actually the ideal condition. I cannot remove this because it's multiple lines, and then this one still works, no errors. This is how you call a function, so that's why you see this statement. So this is also working. Okay. The map one, same thing. Remove the function key, function keyword, add an arrow. Can I remove the parentheses? No, because more than one argument. Any other changes over here? Cannot remove the curly braces over here. Multiple lines, so this should be good. Okay. Um, Anybody completed this one? It's not part of the activity, but still, I would change this also. Almost? It didn't work? Almost. What is all? Oh, all of us. You were able to. Oh, that's nice then. So same thing over here. Remove the function. Okay. Put an arrow key. And this works, but you can make it better, right? Because it's only a single line, right? If you go back over here, it's actually just a first of all, single argument. You can remove the brackets. There's no need for this one. Single line, right? We can remove all of this. We can remove the return, and then we can remove return, and this kind of goes together. So okay, just to be sure, if you go down, you should still see all the map ones. No error, nothing, still printing. Everything is printing movie queue, still there. Okay, I think the rest of them are kind of similar. You remove the function over here. If you completed this one, you should be able to complete this one as well. Same syntax thing, single line. You can remove the everything else. This one again, try to see, make it arrow function and see it's going to give you an error because this keyword over here kind of loses its focus. So there's no this.q. So this should be good. No changes over here. And that's all. Go back over here and leave this activity until this point. Okay, any questions before we move on? No questions? Okay, so the next one that I want to cover is called functional loops. Okay, again, these are part of ES6. They are not available before the functional loops. So we're going to cover three kinds of functional loops. One of them we have already seen, but I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to introduce the next two. Okay. So let me go back to my previous workspace. We will call this functional. I'm going to create a folder. Functional loops. Index.js. Okay, so functional loops, as in loops, what does loop do? Loop helps us iterate over an array, right? Over a collection. Okay, so before we begin coding, let's go ahead and create an array. And I'm going to just copy this array from the example, and you will see we are using the const keyword. So this is an array of objects, movie patrons. Okay, each object has two properties, name and age, and we are going to loop through this. Now, traditionally, what you would do, you would say for I is equal to 0, I is less than movie patrons dot length, I plus plus, and then kind of loop through this array. Okay, but when it comes to ES6, we will take a look at functional loops and see how do we use them. The first loop is for each. Okay, and a lot of you guys have already used this, and we have covered this in JavaScript, but I'll go through it again. The first one is for each. Okay, now what is the syntax for each? It goes by the name of the array that you are trying to loop through. So it's going to be movie patrons, and then for each. Okay, now what does for each takes? It takes a callback function, right? And this callback function can have three arguments: value, index, and the whole array. Okay, a callback function with three arguments, and all of them looks like are optional. All right. So how do we type this in? So it's a callback function, and we are going to use our arrow function. So let's say the first So this is going to be something like this, function patrons, and then you would just say console log um, single patron. Okay, so this loop is going to go ahead and loop through each one of them and output this, right? This is your regular one. We will just replace this with our arrow function. Okay, it's looping through, looks good. So let's go ahead and change this to our arrow function. So we will remove the keyword function. We are going to remove this. Oops, I'm missing the arrow function. Okay, this is not required, so I'm going to remove the brackets from here. Single line, no need for this. Okay, and still works. You can see it's still looping through. Okay, now you can do this. You can do age, access any of these properties, and it will show you the property. Okay, we are using a single one. If you want to add the second argument, which is an index, you would then say this thing, and the second argument is index. Now you're going to get an index back. Console log this, and then console log index. Again, those are optional, and the last parameter is argument. You can put argument as well. So let me comment this out so you guys can see the index clearly, and it shows me the index numbers. Okay, so this is how the for each works. All right. Couple of things remember about for each. For each does not return anything. Okay, you have to remember that. If you are looping through, if you're expecting a return type, or if you are looking for some kind of array that comes back, it does not return. So you cannot, if you are using for each inside your function, if you do this return something, it's not going to work. Okay, because for each does not return anything. Remember that. Okay, it just loops through your array, and that's all it does. And then you can do whatever you want in the body of this function. Okay, but for each does not return anything. It's void. Okay, even if you look at the definition, you will see it says void over here. This means for each does not return anything. Okay, so if you're using for each in a function and you feel like that you are, instead of this, you're going to put a return statement that it gives me an index back or something to my function, this is not going to work. For each does not return anything. Okay, you see my screen is clear. The reason is it does not return anything. Remember that. Okay, any questions on for each? Oops. Okay, again, every concept that I'm showing, I'm going to try to use these things in our code from now on. So kind of get into the habit of using them. Instead of for loops, I'm going to use this or the other two ones that I'm going to show you in a minute. Okay, again, remember for each is part of ES6. It is part of concept called functional loops. Yes, you have a question? What is it? Oh, okay, okay.
But actually, there's no like iterator or anything
Can you expand? What do you mean there's no iterator?
like the I and the
Oh, there is, right? This index,
oh, okay.
right? This is outputting the numbers. Yeah, it's optional. Remember, and there's a third argument, which is your array, which actually gives you the whole array that is being passed over here for some reason. If the third, these two are optional, the third parameter gives you the whole array that you are looping through, which will give you this contains the whole array. No, that's what I'm saying. There might be a use case, I don't know, but the functionality is there. Yes, you might not use it, but the third one, the third argument that is optional is actually gives you the whole array every single time you loop through. Yeah. Yes.
So in that case, you do like patrons and then like index and you just parse something out from it?
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. So, but for every single element, it's going to give you the whole array. You just need to remember that. Yeah. You cannot return anything out of for each. For each does not return, you cannot extract anything out of it. You have to declare a global variable or something and do it. For each does not return anything. Okay, there are the, huh?
You can't return out of it. You can't stop it from hitting every object or every element that's in there.
Well, you can put a break statement, and then that will break. Like you can say, oh, if something break, it doesn't work. I haven't tried it. I thought break would work. That if you say if, um,
Look up continuous, and I think it's pretty bad. You can
yeah, I guess not. It says it's giving me some error. Illegal break statement, so you cannot use break as well. No, it says illegal. Illegal break statement. Okay, so the iterator question, this is your iterator. This is your I. I call it index, but you would call it I or whatever. It gives you the number of the index number of this element in this array. Okay. Now the next one is called filter. So we looked at for each. The next functional loop is called filter. And filter, unlike for each, is going to return you an array. Okay, it's going to give you a new array back. So let's see, what do we use filter for. As the name suggests, you can filter your results on some criteria. Okay, let's suppose you are trying to there is a movie which is R rated, and from the movie patrons array you don't want anybody who is less than 18 years of age into that movie, right? So from this list you're going to filter those people out based on a criteria. And what would be that criteria? Where the age is less than 18, right? And it's going to give you a new array back. Okay, or if you want the people who are allowed to watch that movie, you would say where age is greater than 18. Okay, so you are filtering your array. If you want to filter your array, your collection, you use the filter function. Again, part of ES6 is not available before that. So syntax is a little bit similar to for each. So you would have your name of the array, which is movie patrons, and then you will say dot filter. Okay. Similar syntax: callback function, arrow function. So I'm not interested in the index number this time, but I showed you in the first one, so you have access to it. So we'll say just the patron. Okay. And then I am not going to use curly braces. Okay, what does this mean? If I don't use curly braces, it's one line and it's returning that value back. Okay, remember filter is going to return something. So I'm going to filter and I'm going to say where patron dot age is greater than 17. Okay, so anybody 18 and above are allowed to watch this movie. So I'm kind of filtering my data set based on this. Okay, now one thing over here. When you use the filter, it has to return a truthy value. Okay, remember I'm saying truthy, which means the value that it returned is true. Okay, so it's going to go against this array and it's going to try to match this condition. Every element in the array that returns true for this is going to be part of the new array. Okay, so let's kind of iterate through it. So it's going to loop through the array movie patrons. It's going to come to the first one. It's going to check the condition that you have mentioned over here in your function body. The condition is patron.age is greater than 17. This is going to return false. So this is not going to be included in your data set. It's going to filter this out. It's going to come to the second one. True, included. True, included. True, included. False, excluded. False, excluded. So in the new array, you're going to have actually just these three elements. So it basically filtered your array. And then since this returns, so we are going to say create a new array, say const can watch our movie. Okay, and now if I console log this array, I should have only, oops, nope. Okay, so this is my new array over here. Let me kind of comment this and I'll put this so that you guys can see. Oh, okay. Oh, no, it's even more confusing. Okay, the first is your original array, it's using for each. The second is your filtered array. Okay, again, filter is going to return a new array. Remember that filter returns, it returns a new array size based on some condition, based on a condition that you mention over here. Okay, and it has to return a truthy value. It has to be true. For it's going to skip all the elements that are going to return false for this condition. Okay, so this means you have to put a condition over here. Okay, you cannot be a statement, it cannot be anything else. Okay, you can have some processing. For example, you can have a body and eventually you will have to do a return this thing. Okay, and let's suppose you have some other calculations going on, some more code, whatever, but eventually you will have to have a return statement and it is going to return true or false. Okay, any element that it returns false, it's not going to include in the new array. It's only going to include those elements that are going to return true or truthy, to be correct. Let me go back. Okay, so we have covered two functional loops. The first one, for each, it does not return anything. It does not modify the array in any way. It just loops through the whole array. The second function, filter, it modifies the array. Okay, it modifies the original array and it returns a new array. Okay, if you go ahead, if you print out movie patrons, this remains unchanged. Okay, why? It's not modifying this array. Instead, it's going to return you a new array, and this array is going to have either same size or less size. Okay, now I only have like 3 elements in my array. Oops, so there's a syntax error here. Remove these. Okay, so my new array only has 3 elements versus my original one had 6. Okay, questions? Yes. Yes. Oh, no. This is the new one, right? I'm console logging. What am I console logging? No, the original one is still there. It's returning, yes. Okay, it's returning you a new array. You can console log here. Okay, still there. Alright, so it returns you a new array with a different size, and the size is going to be either same or less, right? It cannot be more unless you're pushing something to you cannot push it because it only expects a truthy to come back. Alright, so for each and filter. Again, ES6, all of these things, React uses them. When we are looking at React, when we are looping through, you will see that we are going to be using these functional loops in React. Okay, any questions before we move on to the last functional loop? No questions? Good. All right, so the last functional loop is called map. Called map function. Okay, so what does map do? map is going to loop through your whole array, okay, but it's not going to, it's going to return as well. It's going to loop through. It's kind of like a combination of for each and filter. It loops through each one, it returns, but it does not modify the size of the array. Okay, the new array that you are going to get is going to be the same size as the array that you are running the map on. This is my original array, right? It has 6 elements. What does filter do? Filter is modifying the size of the array, right? In this case, the size of the array was 6, but the new array that it returns, the size is 3. Okay, what map does is map is going to loop through the array. It's going to return a new array, but the size of the array is going to be the same as whatever the original array is. Okay? What is the difference? The elements inside that array are going to be different. The size remains the same. If you pass in 6 elements to the map, it's going to return a new array with 6 elements. But those elements are going to be different. That's what map does. It maps the old elements into new elements. That's what map does. That's why it's called map. Okay, it's creating a new mapping, it's giving you a new array, but remember, filter is modifying the size of the array, map is changing the elements of the array, but the size still remains the same. Okay, so let's see how do we modify the elements. For example, let's say we want to add a new property over here, and we will call this property the same one over here, can watch our movie. Okay, so I'm going to create a property called can watch our movie, which is going to be true or false. So in this case, the property is going to be false, true, 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 false, and false. Okay, but I'm not going to add the property over here. I'm going to use my map method, and then I'm going to modify this each element of this array. Okay, so first thing we will, syntax is same, so we'll say movie patrons dot map. Again, exact same arguments, a callback function, 3 arguments in that callback function such as value, index, and the whole array. The second 2 are optional. The first one you need to use. Okay, so we will use just the first one. We will say patron, no need for brackets, and this is going to be on multiple lines, so I'm going to do this, and eventually I have to return this patron. Okay, what am I passing in? I have to return the same thing. The only difference is this is going to look a little bit different. Okay, right now it has name and age. I'm going to add a new property called can watch our movie, which is going to be true and false. Okay, so in my map function, how do I do that? I'm going to say if patron age is greater than 17, okay, I'm going to say patron dot can watch our movie. Does this property exist in my array, in my object? It does not. But remember, we can add, this is JavaScript, this is an object, you can add new properties on the fly, right? So we will add a new property, and then we will say true. Okay, else we will say patron dot can watch our movie is false. Okay, now similar to filter function, map function returns you the new array. Remember, the size doesn't change, the elements inside that array are going to change. So we will save this into a new array and say new movie patrons. Okay, and then let's go ahead and just console log this, and you will see let me add a this. So this is first, this is this, let's add one over here. Okay, so the last one, this is your original array, right? Same thing, same size, no changes. This is when you run it through map function, same size. You see, it does not modify the size of the array. If the size of the array is 6, you're going to get back a new array with the same size. What is it changing? It's changing the elements inside this array. Now my new array has a new property called can watch our movie, and it's true or false based on some condition that I did, right? It is mapping it to a new array. Basically, it is modifying each element by looping through them, right? For each, void does not return anything, simply loop through it, does not modify the contents, does not modify the length of the array, right? Filter modifies the length of the array but does not modify the contents of the array. Okay, map function does not modify the length of the array but modifies the contents of that array. So those are the three different use cases. These three functional loops are being used. Any questions? Of these three, the first and the last one are more important. When we get to React, we'll be using map a lot. Okay, so please make sure you understand map clearly. For each is good. Um, if you don't want, you can switch it with for loop, but this is something that you cannot easily switch it. So we'll be using map a lot in our React apps. Okay, questions? Yes. The size of the array is exactly the same. Yeah, so all of these functions do not modify the original array. So let's make sure Irina is satisfied. So we will go back and paste our original. Yes, Michael?
I was just gonna ask, is the application of the map function only limited to adding new properties to the
No, you can change the current one. You can, let's suppose you want to increase the age. Let's suppose um, this application is ran next year and you want to update the age for everybody. So you can do patron.age plus plus. That will modify the age. You don't have to add anything. Yeah, you can modify the current content. Yes. Each element of the, yes, they all three of them are loops. They're going to loop through every single element. Again, why? If you see the syntax, if you see the definition, it's exactly the same. Map also has three callback function with three arguments. Filter also has it. Same with your for each. All three of them have the same syntax. Okay, so the purpose is, yes, they're going to loop through every single, because you cannot return from for each, right? Yeah, that's why you would use the map. So you can modify the contents in your for each, but it's not going to do anything. You cannot, that thing cannot escape from the for each parentheses. They're going to stay over there. That's why you would use a map function. Okay? Good questions. Any other questions? All right, so no questions. Activity number 4. Let's do activity number 4, that is functional loops. Oh, 7:41. Let's take a break. We'll come back at 8 o'clock. And then when you guys come back, start working on activity number 4. We'll take a break now.
But we've got Bruce Wayne too. Guillermo is well, Guillermo, Pancho, expenses. Or from Richard. What are some songs together? Because at least that's Guillermo. Yeah, I didn't know that. You know, it's funny though. Yeah, one of my uncles names is Pancho. No, it's Francisco. No, it's not. It's Pancho. You're like, wait, what? It's yeah, it's Francisco. It's not Francisco. Well, well, in school too, like I had a friend, Jim, and our teacher, you know, she would go to roll call. Why aren't you like James? But it's Jim. No, well, it's got to be something else. It's not Johnny, you know, John. No, Jim. Wait, no, Pancho is Francisco. Pancho is. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. Ignacio, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Nacho. Forget that. I have no idea. No, his name's not Jake. Totally makes sense. Wow. I thought she was just throwing the extra Spanish word in there. So trying to learn Spanish. She also
All right, we ready to move on to the next one? Oh, go over this one. I thought it was which. Okay, which one? Which one did you are you working on? Which one are you working on? The the map one, the odd or even. So what are they saying? So original array returns a new array. So let's quickly type this out and call it const. This is going to be a new array, correct? And then your original array, and then you're using the map function. Okay. What are you passing in? You're getting a number, so num and this thing. Okay. What is the condition? Should give us back odd, even. So now I have access to each element of this array. So if it is, so this is the, remember we did like a calculation how to determine if the number is odd or even, and that's the mod sign. So if you do number mod 2, if this is 0, this means the number is even. If this is not 0, this means the number is odd. Okay, so instead of writing an if condition, I mean, this would be if this is equal to 0, return even, otherwise return odd. So if you use a ternary operator, you can make it even more single line. So if this is true, you would return even. If this is false, you would return odd. And this is how you can wrap this up into a, not a curly braces, just this thing bracket, it was still returned, so that kind of looks like they're all together. So I get each element, right? And for each element, I'm checking if this element is odd or even. If it is even, you would return even. If it is odd, you would do odd. Or I mean, if you want the longer version, that would be if this equal to 0, return even, else return odd, but get the idea. Make sense? Okay. What is the what? The ternary operator. It checks, it's differentiating, it's saying that any condition that is on this side will be executed if this statement is true, and if this statement is false, it will execute this one. This is just part of the syntax. That it is evaluating this statement. If this is true, it will return this. If this is false, it returns this. Yeah, question mark is part of the syntax for the ternary operator. Any other questions? Yes. One. I don't think one is a prime number. We skipped one, right? Well, so what's the question? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So let's move on to the next one. Again, please make sure you go back and do these activities. if you haven't done them already. We'll move on to our next one, which is um, so we covered functional loops. We are going to look at for loop, but not the traditional one. We are going to look at two different kind of for loops. One of them we have already seen once we that we run on our objects. Okay, the for in loop. I'm not sure if you guys remember. We saw this loop is called for in. For in. Okay, you use for in loop if you're trying to loop through an object to find its name of the property and the value. For example, if you have a object called, let's call it object, simple, and then this is my object and it has some properties. Let's say I have a property called A, this is 1, B, 2, C, 3. Okay, object. If I want to loop through the properties of this object, I would use a for in loop, correct? So I would say for, here's the syntax for in. Let's remove all of this. Okay, let's call it for, and then you declare a key in object, which is this. Okay, this was the syntax. Now if you print this out, you can access each of the properties. Oops. So you would say, let's use our template literals. Okay, dollar, this one. Okay, I kind of like blanked out for a minute. I couldn't find the dollar sign in my keyboard. All right, let's call it property. So it's listening. So property, this is property, and this is the value of that property. So I will say console log property, put a colon just for the syntax, then dollar. And then how do I access the value for this property? Object. Okay, using the square one because I cannot use the dot notation over here. Obviously, because the property is a variable and it's changing every single time. Okay, do you guys remember this activity when we looked at Node.js? Maybe that was too long ago, right? So it kind of prints out all your object properties and the values. Okay, so if you want to loop inside, if you want to find the property and the value of an object, you use a for in loop. Okay, now some of you have used for in loop to loop through an array as well, right? I know for sure, Goose. Okay, now before you start using it, please read the documentation, and they say do not use for in. For in was created to loop through the properties and values of an object. It wasn't meant to loop through an array. Probably it works. I'm not saying that, but they're saying behind the scene, the for in loop does not keep track of the index number. Okay, when you're looping through an array, the index is important. If an element is at the third index, I want it to be given to me at the third index. But if you loop through for in, from the MDN documentation, it says they cannot guarantee it. So for people like Goose who want to use this for in loop, there is a for off loop. That is for meant for arrays. Yeah, it's called for off, and that we can use for arrays. For off. Again, all of these are ES6. They do not exist in your previous versions. So for example, if I have an array, let's create an array. Let's say const arr, create an array, simple array of, which is numbers, 3, 4. Okay, and then you can use the for off. You will see Visual Studio has it. So for off, this would be the element. Okay, element is each one of these, and you're looping through arr. Okay, and now you can go ahead and console log element, and it's going to output each element of the array. Okay, just like this. So instead of using, if you don't like the for the our basic for loop for I equal to 0 and all that stuff, you can use for off. Okay. For in, again, is for the primarily it is used for looping through the object properties. For off is for your collections, arrays, and all that stuff. So you can use for off. Similar syntax, this gives you each element and then the name of the array that you are looping through. Close this. Okay, make sure you remember the difference between for in and for off loops. Okay, if somebody asks you difference and why would you use one and in which case you would use the other one, for off you would use for collections like arrays, for in you would use for objects. Okay, questions? Pretty straightforward. Yes.
Is it the same as for each?
Yeah, for each does it's looping through. Is that what your question is? For each also loops through an array. For also loops through an array, but you can return anything from here, right? For each, you cannot return anything.
But from here, yes.
Yeah, you can put a break and then return from anything. It's a regular for loop. Remember, you run your for loop for I equal to 0, and if you want to return from it, you can do it, right? So you can do the same thing.
Why do I want to use for each?
Right, because some people like Goose prefer for it. Again, it's easier, and I know I like this. Why you would use it instead of if you are using your for loop for I equal to 0. This is a bit easy. For each, I understand it takes a while. Maybe Irina for you it's easy, but people like me it took me a while to understand for each, especially with the callback function. It gets a little bit confusing. So for it, so this is a little bit easier one. That's the only thing.
So sometimes you're not going to return
Yeah.
do something on every element.
Right. Okay. Irina is not convinced. She does not like for off loop. Irina, you can ignore this. You can go back to the for each one. Yeah. So I mean, for this is again, it doesn't require a callback. It doesn't require all those stuff. That's why. But when it comes to React code, we'll be using for each. I just wanted to show the reason I wanted to explain this is so that you guys know there's a difference between for in and for off. Okay, Goozy got it. Never forget it. All right. So should be pretty easy. Just the next activity. Just take a look at it. It's number 6. This is for off. Now in your example, when you see they are looping through a map or something. Let me see the first. Let me look at the what is the activity. Okay, so now in your example that you will see that I'm going to post, they're using like a map and looping through it. Looks a little bit more complicated, but again, don't worry about it. I don't think I've ever used the syntax that they're suggesting. Let's keep it simple, and this should be good for your use case. Okay, but remember the difference, and just take a few minutes. Should be a quick activity, and then we'll move on to the next one. So this is activity number 6. So you have your index, okay, and index has um, all these songs. It's not using jQuery, so we can go back to our original document dot query selector function and get all of these, and then you just have to loop through them. I think the more complicated part is how do you get these out. Um, Again, if you don't remember, it's cons songs. Now without jQuery, this is because if you look at your index.html, there's no addition of jQuery. But remember, we can do everything in JavaScript that jQuery does. So we can use go back to our always document dot what is it query selector all. Okay, get all all of these elements. And what element am I looking for? I'm looking for UL and LIs. So you will say UL followed by LI. Okay, this will give you all the documents or all the elements into this array for LIs. So you will get this. Okay, now you just have to loop through it using for of and then console log or just create an array. That's all. So basically this would be for, I won't use the helper from Visual Studio. We'll type it out. So for const song of array name is songs. Okay. Um, console log this, or I think the requirement is to change the CSS or something, but you know, you can change that. Something like that. So basically, how do you loop through an array using for of? All right. So let's move on to the next one. This was a quick break. I mean, I knew just want you guys to be aware of these two for loops that are available. The next one we will see is more important, and you will see occurrence of this next operation a lot. Okay, I've seen in code at work people are kind of using it a lot more. So this in versus off. The next concept is called rest parameter and spread operator. Okay. So rest parameter and spread operator. Okay. Why are we covering those two in the same exercise? Because both of them use the same operator, same syntax. Okay, and the syntax for both of them is three dots. I don't know if you guys have seen that. We'll go over it. For both of them, the syntax is three dots. That's it. Okay, now three dots followed by something, and we'll take a look at it what it means. But both of them use three dots. How do you differentiate between them? It's based on the context. Once I show you how each one of them works, once you see them in somebody else's code, you will be able to realize, okay, if this is being used as a rest parameter or it is being used as a spread operator. Okay, based on the context, you should be able to differentiate between them. Okay, but the names are two different: rest parameter and spread operator. Okay, so usually what you will see is dot 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 followed by name. How the syntax is dot dot dot, three dots, and a variable name. Okay, again, just to reiterate, how do you differentiate between them? Once you see the code, you will be able to differentiate between them by context. Okay, you will be like, oh, if this is being used in this context, this means it's a rest parameter. If this is being used in this context, it means it's a spread operator. Okay, so let's take a look at how each one of them looks. So the first thing we'll cover is the rest parameters. Okay, let's go over here. Now let's suppose I have a function. Okay, I'm going to use our old syntax, but both of them work just so that you guys first can see what's going on. Okay, and then what it does is it returns the addition. It adds these two numbers and returns the sum. Okay, now how do I call this function? Let's console log the return statement. I would say add 1 comma 2. Okay, this is how you would call this function, right? Let's open this. Okay, so I get the result back. Right, now what if I pass in a third argument? What is going to happen? Does it change anything? It doesn't, right? What happens? What is happening to the anything after the second argument that I'm passing? Huh? It's what? It just ignores it, right? So this function is specific. It can only take two arguments. All right, this is not going to work if you keep passing in. They're going to ignore them. Okay, this function is going to ignore. Now, if we modify this function to take more than one argument, let's see. What if I'm going to use a rest parameter for this one instead of. Let me close this first. So I'm going to write another function. Okay, let's call it add 2. Now I'm going to use the rest operator. Okay, what does this mean? Dot 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 and a variable named nums. This means you can pass any number of arguments to this one and it's going to work. Okay, it's going to work for one argument, it's going to work for 2, 3, 4, 5, any number of arguments, it's going to work. Okay, now let's see what is this going to come out as. It's going to come to you as an array. Okay, so once you call this function, you are going to call this function. How do you call this function? You're going to say console log this thing. Okay, add 2. You can call this function with 5 arguments. You can call this function with 3 arguments. You can call this function with 2 arguments. It doesn't matter. As long as you have this parameter, it's going to take any number of arguments and it's going to give this as an array to you. Okay, so this is going to come as an array inside my function. So if this is an array, if I want to add all the numbers that are inside an array, I can use my the recently learned for off loop. Okay, I can say for const element, let's call it number, for number of nums, and then I can add them up. Let's say let sum plus equal to num. Okay, let's declare this variable on the top. Let sum is equal to 0. right? Once this is complete, we will return sum. Okay. Now, if I call this for, if I run this, oops. What did I forget? Oh, it's adds. Let's do that. Thank you. Okay. So the first one is being called with 5 arguments. The second one is being called with 3 arguments, 2 arguments. It doesn't matter. So this is what a rest parameter means. Okay, you can pass in any number of arguments in this if you're using a rest parameter, and the rest parameter is dot 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 and then a variable name. Okay, within your function, you're going to get this as an array. This is going to be an array which is going to have all your arguments. You can console log nums. You will see this is all these arguments are coming to you as an array. Okay, so if where is this useful? You have no idea how many arguments are going to be passed into your function, so you can use this, and then based on that you can go through and see what do you have to do for each one of these elements. Okay. um, Now few caveats to this. You can pass in more than one arguments as well. Let's suppose you have another function, okay, and then you can say my num1, num2, and then you can also have nums. Okay, this means that this function requires at least 2 arguments and the rest are optional. Okay, so it will work for 2 arguments and then more than 2. Okay. So you can console log nums, let's say for now, let's say num1. Okay, you can add them up, but the last one is going to be an array, so you'll have to make sure that you understand that this argument is an array. Okay, so if you console log this, nums is going to show you all the arguments that are after this two. All of them would be bundled into an array. Okay, let me stop this. Now in this case, you would call 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5. So 1 and 2 would be num1, num2, and everything else after that would be in this array. Okay. Now the thing is, if you have more arguments, your rest parameter is only going to be the last argument. You cannot have a rest parameter in the middle of the array. This is not going to work. It's going to give you a syntax error. This is not going to work. Okay, it always has to be the last argument. Okay, it cannot be in the middle, it cannot be in the first, it has to be the last argument. And you can see the logic behind it, that the first, second kind of puts those arguments in place, and then everything else that follows is basically an array. It's all free field. You can pass in any argument, no argument, it doesn't matter. Okay, now as you can see, the rest parameter, it's used only in functions. If you see a function, oh, I don't have a function name, that's why. That's 3. Okay, if you see this 3 dot and a variable name in your function argument, this is called a rest parameter. Okay, spread operator is a bit different. I'll go through it where you will find the spread operator, but if you see this operator inside a function, you will call this a rest parameter. And how does it work? It means that all the arguments are going to be inside this array. Okay, and then this is how you would have to parse. You have to loop through it, use the index number, whatever it takes you, but this is going to be an array. You have to remember that. Okay, now you will see this a lot in React. Even if you go to the React documentation, they use rest parameter a lot. Okay, it's spreading quickly. I've seen it. It looks confusing, but as long as you understand that the only use case that you will find of a rest parameter is in a function argument. Okay, and it just means that more than one argument can be passed into this function. At least 2 and more than 2, 100, 200, doesn't matter. There can be more than 2 arguments over here. Okay, Yes. In this case, any number of arguments, 0 or 1, 0 or infinite. Yes.
I'm sure I'm missing it, but what would be the benefit of having your two parameters set and then, like, rather than doing like the rest parameter and then just having a condition in there that said like if you have less than if nums dot length is less than 2, then give me an error message like it needs to. I'm just wondering like when you think of because this way you're not going to know why it's not working if you don't pass it.
Right, right. In this case, like you would have to pass in 2 or more. If you pass in less than 2, it's going to give you an error. Yeah, in this case, I mean, usually what you will see is this is case because kind of solves the whole issue. Um, Not sure what the use case would be, but the option is still there. So that's why I wanted to show. But usually, even in React, you will see that this is the more common syntax. Yeah, I haven't really seen this one. But in case there's a use case you want to do this, I want to make sure that this has to be the last parameter. It cannot be in the middle, cannot be in the beginning. Yeah, but Ethan is right. I mean, usually you will find this because it has 0 or as many arguments as you want. Yes, Chris.
Can you pass an array directly into it? Like,
So yeah, you can, but it will be an array within an array then. It's going to wrap everything in an array. Yeah, because this is an array. If you pass an array, yeah, you can pass an array, but it's going to be an array within
I
an
guess
array.
that's what you use to spread out.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be an array. It's going to wrap all your arguments inside an array. So yeah, you can pass an array, object, number, string, all of them as one big argument also, and it will work. For example, if you pass in for our where's our add to, you can say number, you can pass an array. Unfortunately, this will work because this is JavaScript. Mix match arrays. This will also work. This will also work. Right? All of this will work. So this is a mixed array. The first is a number, second is an array. So this all will be wrapped into an array over here. Okay? Object, string, number, anything you want. All right, is that clear? Rest parameter is going to be an argument inside your function. All right? The next one is the spread operator. Spread operator, as it says, is going to spread out. What is it going to spread? It's going to spread an array. All right? Now let's take a look what that means. So let's suppose I have an array. Let me see if I let's create an array const an array of dragons. Okay, I have dragon and then drago. Okay, an array of dragons. Now if I have another array, let's say this thing, and I have some elements inside this array. Okay, and then okay, now my dragons are also part of my weapons, right? These are now my second array is saying, oh, these are all the weapons. Okay, so dragon glass against the white walkers, wildfire, and then dragons are also my weapons. So what I can do is instead of copying this whole array and then putting it inside over here, right? Is this correct syntax? This is correct syntax. An array can have a mixed match. It can have a string, array, object, anything. But this is only JavaScript. So instead of doing this and making it more complicated, you can use the spread operator, and you can say dot 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 name of the array dragons. Okay. And then now if you console log weapons, it's going to console log dragons, and then it's going to go to this, it's going to console log each one of this, it's going to spread it out. It's going to bring each value inside over here. Okay, so it's basically would be Drogon, all these three values over here, and then wildfire. So if you console log weapons, okay. There was an error somewhere. Okay, let's run this and see. Okay, so you see what it did? It spread these three elements, expanded them out. Okay, so that's why it's called a spread operator. Okay, it's the use case is usually in your arrays or your collection, and instead of actually copying this over and doing all this stuff, you can use this as a shortcut, and then it will expand that out. It will spread it out. Okay, now you see the context. If it is being used inside an array, it's a spread operator. If you are seeing this in your function arguments, it's a rest parameter. Yes, Raymond.
Does it actually change the array, or is it, I mean, so like if for some reason you deleted dragons
Mm-hmm.
and weapons no longer have dragons included?
Yeah, it is. If you see, it is kind of changing the array. So I'm console logging weapons. It spread it out and it changed it. Now everything is in memory. I mean, if you stop this execution, it will go back to this.
Like, you will delete the dragons, but
Mm-hmm.
what will happen?
So it's going to delete it from weapons. How do you delete dragons? Are you saying that
You
I
set it to like a
It
complete array.
doesn't
right? So it's going if you set it to you are saying say dragons is equal to this thing. Okay. Um,
I don't know why you did
oh, it's a const. No worries. Oops. Let's go back and so what happens? What he is saying is now if I um, remove the dragons, okay, do you see any change? No change because it made a copy of this and it already has it, so it's there. You how do you delete from this array? You would have to go into weapons dot element number this and delete it. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, but if you commented out like dragons.
Oh yeah, it's going to give you a syntax error. Yeah, yeah. If you comment this out because this doesn't exist. Mhm. Okay, so these are again commonly used. Again, understand the context. If it is in the context of a function, it's a rest parameter. That's how the intention is. If it is being used inside an array, it's a spread operator. Okay, but the syntax is exactly the same: three dots and a variable name. Okay, so you will have to recognize which one is it and what it is doing based on the context. Okay, does everybody understand that based on the context, you are able to use the same syntax for two different things? Okay, and this is part of ES6. React uses a lot, and mostly it uses in your function arguments. We'll see. Okay, it's not uncommon to see dot dot dots in React code. All right, questions? No questions? Good. All right, so let's take a look at next activity number 8. This is going to be using REST and spread operator. Then we will move on to our next one. Activity number 8. Let's see. Copy the songs array into another array using the spread operator. Modify the addition. So let's go back here. So this is the songs array. Create a new one and copy the songs array into it. Okay, just like I did for the dragon and the weapons one. Um, modify the add function that it uses spread rest operator, rest parameter actually. It's not an operator. Let's correct that. Okay, so you would add a rest parameter over here. Make sure it still works. You can pass in more than one arguments. Nothing else would change. Right, give it a try. Make sure your code is compiling and running. Doesn't give you an issue. You could leave this one as it is and create a new function called addition. And then instead of all these arguments, just pass a dot 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 operator and then use the array dot reduce. So keep this function as it is. Instead, create a new one, pass in your rest parameters. Then you wouldn't need this part. And if you call your rest parameters as an array, you don't even have to change line number 11. Okay, take a look at the comments. Make sure you are able to convert both of them before we move on to the next one. Huh?
You didn't get it. You get it?
No, I didn't get it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you changed mine. So, I don't know if you remember the band Blur. They had this song that went. This is the first
Oh, this
line
is
of it,
it.
and it's called Song Two.
It's called
That's the
Song.
name of that's the name of the song.
Alright.
Song Two. That's why I put it.
Oh,
As
okay.
a joke. I'm not.
Somebody else has a better
Daniel
sense of
doesn't
humor.
know his
That,
90s music.
yeah, and somebody else has a better.
Yeah. You didn't know it was called Song Two, though. It's not.
Good. Any questions on any of these? So if you see, you can add the spread operator at the beginning of the array, in the middle of the array, end of the array. It doesn't matter. Rest parameter has to be at the end. So you can add song 2 to the first array. You can add it over here at the end, beginning. It doesn't matter. Well, this is declared first, so you can do songs here. This is also valid. You can do it towards the end. This is also fine, or you can do it in the middle. Yes.
Um, can you do songs, song three, whatever,
Songs what?
song three or whatever, and then have the spread operator or whatever?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Did you try?
I just thought of that.
Again, I have not tried like every single combination of this, but it will be tried. I don't see an issue why it wouldn't work. Yeah, but try it and just make sure and let us know as well. So this is what Raymond is saying. So it'll just expand these both out. Try it and within that. So if you do songs and then 0, oops. So why do you think it's returning each letter from this one? It's spreading. It's what is this now? Do you know what string is? String is an array of characters. So when you do dot dot song 0, this gets you a string creep, which is itself is an array of characters. So that's why it says CREEP. Right? That's the reason that it does it. What do you mean? Like single one? I mean that would be this thing. This would bring the single song. Spread operator is it will spread everything out. Yeah. Well, I mean this will work, but again, spread means you are expanding the whole thing out. This would bring you just this one, the first index. Okay. Any other questions? I wasn't planning on what does reduce do. Did you See this? I think it does it adds these number to, like, it reduces the.
Yeah, it's up to numbers and that last parameter, it can be any number and it can be added to that the final number, something like that. That's true. I know what I said how it.
So it takes this reduce, if you look at the documentation, it takes the two numbers and adds them. So it's going to take these two, add them, then it's going to add the fourth number to it. So it's reducing each of them. So let's suppose if you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first time it's going to do 1 and 2 because it only takes two arguments. All right, this your reduce function takes in only two arguments. So it's going to take the first two, combine them, and the combination is 3. The next time, the first argument is going to be 3 because it has already combined these two. So it's going to be 3, which is this, and the next argument is again 3, so it's going to be 3 and 3. Okay, so this would be 6. The next time it would be addition of this, which is 6, and the second argument would be the next one, which is 4. So then it's going to add these two, 10, and so on and so forth. So it keeps reducing from the first one, but it takes in two arguments.
It's only the sum or we can do the minus
I mean, looks like this is the. I don't know if it does what else does it do.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can reduce the whole array, I think.
Where you can actually do that.
It has to be a callback function, yes. So it definitely does the addition part, and that's where the examples are. Usually, I think it's used for addition. What you can use it in object, but looks like it's going to combine this, and still give you the sum. Looks like you can use it on the string array. It's going to combine all of these. Alice, Bob, Tiff, Bruce. Alice would be like one big giant string. Yeah, but in this case, it's adding all those numbers up. All right, let's look at our next one. It's called object destructuring. Again, this is also common, and I've seen this being used a lot as well. Did I create? Yeah. Okay, it's called object destructuring. Object destructuring. Okay, so you're going to destructure an object, and how does this work? So the first thing we'll do, we'll create an object, and then give some values. Let's create an object aria, and this object has two properties. Let's say give it a name. Okay, and let's say an array of parents. Okay, so this is my object. Now, if I want to access, let's suppose the name property, how would I access? I would say the name of the object aria.name, right? If I want to assign this to a variable, I would say aria name is equal to this thing, right? Simple object parsing. If I want to get the parents property, I would say and assign them. I would say aria.parents. Okay, This is how you would normally going about if you have an object and you're trying to parse that object. Okay. Now, what does object destructuring does? It simplifies this exact syntax. So I want to assign the name property and I want to get the parents property. You can assign them together in this fashion. So you will say const, okay, parentheses, and then is equal to aria. Okay. Now within the parentheses, you're going to have variable names that has to match the name of the property here. For example, name parents. Okay. Now what happens with this syntax? It goes to this object and it looks for this name and assigns it to this variable over here. These are variables. These are not objects. These are variables. Okay. Then it goes into this object, looks for parents and assigns it to this object. So you can say console log name, console log parents, and if you run this, both of them are going to have those two properties. So if I say no, okay, where is that typo? 9 7. Oh, this one. Yeah, I was copy pasting. You see how lazy that is. Okay. If you put in a different name, you are going to get an this. Okay, you are getting undefined. Why is it undefined? Again, object destructuring only works if the name of the properties are being assigned to the same name of the variable. Okay, so what it does is it goes to this object and looks for a property called name1, doesn't find it, so that's why it's undefined. Okay, does this object has a property called name1? It does not. What it has is the property called name, so that's why it will assign it to name. Okay, so instead of doing this, you can use object destructuring. Again, ES6 part does not exist before that. So you can pass an object. If you want to pull any number of properties from an object, you can declare it. This could be const or let, doesn't matter. We're using const because this is not changing. If you're changing this, you'll have to make this let. Okay, parentheses and the property names that you're trying to map to. Okay, so it takes an object and it destructures or breaks it down into this thing. Okay, similar, you can have another object, same thing, and you will see this that React uses this a lot too. Okay, you're going to get an object back from some function, from something, and instead of doing this, you will see that we'll be using this. So this means that aria.name property is going to be assigned to this variable. Aria.parents property is going to be assigned to this variable, and it's matching by the property names. Okay, you can use them in a function also. For example, let's suppose you have a function called log character, and then you are passing a character arrow function, and then what it does, it just console logs character dot name plus character dot parents dot length. Let's just use the length for now. Okay, and if I call this function, I would say log character as an aria. Okay, it goes and it updates this. So let me comment this out so that it is clear. Okay, so it does console log this and this. Okay, so we can change this argument to use object destructuring as well. For example, you would say const log character 2 is equal to, and then you have a argument name, just have just the same way we declared on the top on line number 9, name parents, and then you can say console log name plus parents dot length, okay, and log character 2, and you can pass in this object over here. Okay, this also works. So instead of passing in just instead of an argument of just character, you can destructure this in your function argument as well. Okay, so this way you don't have to worry about what are the properties. You already know what is going to come, but it's just another way to write this function, which is an object. Just destructure the arguments, but you have to remember you have to use this syntax over here. It has to be curly braces, object property names, which has to match whatever the object property names are, and then it's going to automatically put this in. Okay. Now, what if I switch them? You think it's going to work if I switch? If I say parents and name, do you think this is going to work? Huh? Why not? Yeah, because how is object destruction working? It's looking for this property, this thing in your object, right? It doesn't matter what the position is. It's going to find this and it's still going to output. Oops. If you see over here, it will still find the correct one, and then console log that. So the first is name and second is parent. So it doesn't matter. The position doesn't matter. What matters is this object has to match this thing. So ARIA object has a property called name, so it has to be name. Has a property called parents, it has to be parent. Okay, so this concept is called object destructuring. Questions? Let me stop this. Again, this is, you will see this a lot in React as well. Again, part of ES6, and we'll be kind of using any concept that I'm covering. I'm going to try and make sure that we use every single one of them. Again, that's like a standard practice, and if you see somebody else's React code, you will see they're using all of these concepts that we have covered. There are a few more, but they are like less important, but these are most common ones that you will see. You might run into different ones. If you do, make sure you research, understand if it is part of the React or it is actually part of ES6. But all of them, all of the ones that I have covered, these are all part of ES6. Nothing to do with React. They are more popular because React started using them a lot. Now anybody who's writes React code kind of follows this convention. Okay, so this is object destructuring. Any questions on object destructuring? Okay, so we started with arrow functions, then looked at functional loops, 3 types of functional loops, for each, filter, and map. Okay, make sure you understand the difference between all 3 of them. This would help you to see which one to use when you're writing some React code. Okay, then we looked at the difference between for in and for off. For in, used for objects. For off, you can use for collections or arrays. Then we looked at the rest parameter or spread operator. Both of them are same syntax, dot 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 variable name. Okay, rest parameter used in function arguments. Spread operator used in when you're trying to expand arrays. Okay, the last one, the more recent one that we looked at is object destructuring. This means that instead of creating new names and assigning each one of them, you can do the same thing in just one line using object destructuring. The syntax is const or let or var. Okay, the name of the properties, they have to match whatever the object has. Okay, and then it's going to assign this to these variables. Again, these are, I know the syntax looks like an object, but these are actually variable names. Okay, if you see these are, this is basically saying const parents is equal to arya dot parents. Okay, and const name is equal to arya dot name. Okay, this syntax, this one line is actually translating it to this. So these two are basically your variable names. Okay, just to make it short, that's why object destruction comes into place. Don't have to, you can do the same thing in just one line. Okay, now, any questions? Yes.
So does it get mostly used as like function arguments?
No, actually, it's more used like this. Yeah.
Temporarily? Because it's not. You know,
Yeah, so you're going to
I guess
get,
I just have to see it.
yeah, so usually you will get this like this in an argument, and then you would put the destructuring inside your function. So if this was, let's put a parentheses here. Okay, if I wanted to do destructuring in, oh, did I make a, this. So I wanted to do destructuring in this function. How would I do it? I would say um, const parents and then character. Okay, this is how it's mostly used. You will see this syntax a lot.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, this is what you will see.
Having like destructure in the function.
Yeah,
Seems like
right. It's I again, it's, I haven't seen this a lot, but again, I want to make sure that this option is available. It's not incorrect syntax if you get confused, but usually what I've seen is this thing. Yeah, it comes as a character and then you destructure inside your function. Yeah, this is more common. Any other questions? Okay. Last thing, again, I'm going to show you the code for this. We have already covered it, but I want to make sure you understand. I know you guys, did anybody do the constructor active homework actually? Oh, you did? Oh, okay. All right, so this is just to remind you that we have constructors and classes um, in JavaScript now, and you will see that React uses um, the class syntax a lot. Everything, all the components that you will see, not all of them, some of the components that you will see, React uses the class for it. Remember what is a class? An object is by definition is anything that you can see, feel, touch, any real life thing. Okay, for example, the TV is an object, car is an object, anything that you can see or touch, you would say that's an object, right? Simple definition. Okay, what is a class? A class is a template that represents that object or a set of objects. For example, if I had to say cat, dog, frog, fish, what would be, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Like a generalization. Animal. So the object would be cat, dog, fish, rabbit, and all that stuff. The class would be an animal. Say, okay? So an object is more specific. A class is something that represents that object. Okay, so when we talk about vehicle, it could be, the objects would be name of the cars, could be name of the trucks, anything, but all of them more general form, a template, that's called a class. Okay, now a class can have a constructor. Remember, if you are creating new objects using the new keyword, you need a constructor. So in JavaScript, you have the method, the name has to start with constructor. Okay, a class can have methods, so it has a method accelerate, it has a method log speed, and also has a method break. Now what the method does, whatever it does, it uses some of the properties that we have mentioned inside this class, speed and top speed, and then adds them up or executes or whatever it does. Okay, but more important is a class is composed of your variables or properties and then your methods. Okay, now how do you create an object from this class? You would use the new keyword. Okay, once you have the new keyword, you can access the functions and properties using the dot notation. Over here, you're declaring a new variable, a new object, and then you can access log speed, accelerate, and all this stuff. Okay, again, just remember ES6. This concept was there before ES6. The only reason they use the class keywords is because for programmers who are coming from different languages, we are more used to class and objects. Behind the scenes in JavaScript, they're all functions. They're actually not class and objects. It's just a wrapper. It's called a sugar syntax. And they introduced in ES6 because for people who are coming from different programming languages, we're not used to um, seeing classes and objects as functions. Okay, when I pose this solution, you will see if you can do this without classes and objects, but it's a different way. Behind the scene, these are actually just functions. Okay, so last thing, if you this is the same thing. You have a class called car. Now, if you wanted to generalize even further, right? Let's suppose when I said um, let's suppose if I'm more generalizing, if I say, if I put some name of the birds or name of fishes, if I say um, trout, dory, or clownfish, right? You would say there are animals, but if I say, okay, what is the property that is only specific to fishes? They can swim, but they cannot fly, right? So you cannot classify them animals. You would have to generalize them even further. You would have to say, okay, these belong to a class called fish, whereas birds that have the property that they can fly, they belong to a class called birds. Okay, in turn, fishes and birds still belong to the animal. Okay, so you are kind of generalizing them further and further. So it is, if you had to draw them out, you would have something like a pyramid structure. You would have animals on top, and then you would have more general classes such as fish, bird, and objects for these classes would be something like this, and then whatever the bird means over here. Okay, so when you have this kind of relationship, this is called inheritance. Fish, this class is inheriting from this class, and this class is also inheriting from this class. Now, how do we specify this in code? Again, it's less important, but I want you guys to know. You will see this. React automatically does it for you, but you will see this extends keyword. This means that there is a more general class like animals, and then there is a specific class called car, which is actually inheriting from vehicle. Okay, so if you had to draw this out, in that case, instead of animal class, you would have vehicle, and beneath vehicle, you will have a class called car. Okay, so these are kind of extending out. So they use the keyword extends. What it does is when you use the keyword extend, you can access all the functions, all the properties that belong to your, we call this parent class. Okay, now for example, if you see, is there an accelerate function in this class? There's no accelerator function. Where is this coming from? It is actually coming from the vehicle class. And how did you create that relationship? You use the keyword extends and said it extends from this class. So any object that is instantiated from this class, for example, Ferrari, will have access to all the methods from your car class and will also have access to methods and properties for the class that you have mentioned in extends. So basically your vehicle class, it will have access to accelerate, log speed, brake, even speed, and top speed, these two properties over here. Yes,
What's that super thing?
what is it?
The super?
Excellent question. What does super do? Super means you are calling a constructor of your super or your parent class. And what is that? Your super or your parent class is vehicle. So it is going to go, when you do super and then you pass in this, it's going to go back over here. It's going to call this constructor. It's going to do this and then come back over here. Okay, so super means call the constructor of your parent class or super class. It's kind of used synonymously. Call the constructor of parent or superclass. And what is the parent or the superclass for car? It is vehicle. So it's going to call this constructor over here. That's what super does.
And so in this case, your top speed for this is going to be 50.
It is going to be 200 because you are creating a new object. You are saying new car Ferrari 200. It's going to call this method over here, constructor. It's going to say 200 and then it's going to call this one is going to pass in 200. It's going to ignore 50 because 50 is if you don't pass anything, right? So it's going to be 200.
So now I can just say here this dot const.
Yes, you can do that also. Yes, but again, JavaScript allows you to do that. Any other language, you cannot do it. So we are trying to, JavaScript is trying to be something that it's not. So we try to follow the standards, which are actually object oriented, actually are classes. So if you were using any other language, you would do it like this. But yes, you're right. In JavaScript, you can just call it. It will still
Can I
work.
use more than one?
You cannot use more than one because remember, it's going to ignore, it only expects one argument over here.
Okay.
So if you pass anything, it's basically going to be ignored.
But I have two here. Can I use two there?
If you have, yeah, if you have one more parameter over here, like a, then yes, you will have to pass in something else over here. Yeah, these has to match it. So just like a function call. The only difference is you're using a keyword called super. Otherwise, it's a function. Just like how you'd call a function. You might actually be able to use a spread operator over here. Oh, sorry, the rest parameter also over here. Give it a try and see. I haven't tried it, but it's a
Why
function.
is it parameter not argument?
Not what?
Argument?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's that's the name that caught up. It's actually called rest and spread operators, but conventionally they are rest parameter. Just to, again, as I said, people use argument one of the other. So okay, again, this is the least important. It's good to know so that you understand extends and class keyword. Otherwise, all the before ones are more important and they're more widely used. Okay, I know there's 1 minute. Let me. There's no other thing. I will post the solutions. One more thing. Saturday, I'm going to introduce React, and that would be the last class before you guys go into your 2 weeks vacation. Or I hope it's not a vacation. But before I begin, there is somebody I would like you guys to meet. Her name is Sharon Bondurant. She is a CEO and founder of AZ Tech Finders. I'm not sure if you have heard about that company. It's a recruiting firm here in local company. She's the CEO and founder. She wanted to come in for your demo day on our project too, but she was not able to make it. So she wants to. We'll do a virtual call at 10 o'clock in the morning. Um, Again, this is my personal connection. It has nothing to do with Trilogy or anything. I just want you guys to get all the help you can get. So I asked her if she can come and talk to you guys, give you some insight, how the recruiting works, what kind of jobs she has. So please, I'll start the call at 10, probably like end at 10:30, depending on how many questions you have. If you have any questions, please bring them up. Make sure you add her as a connection after the call. It's a good contact to have. Okay, so you guys will meet her on Saturday at 10, and then we will start our React class. All right. I will see you guys on Saturday. Let me know if you have questions. I will be here.